strategist Pablo O'Hanna. Pablo, finally. I mean, what took him so long? It's absolute madness that he didn't think that perhaps it'd be really good in terms of my own PR, but in terms of my own well-being and my mental health, to potentially maybe go and see your father, or maybe take the children there, the grandchildren, because it's important.
So often with these stories, I find myself asking the same question, which is that forget what is kind of right or wrong. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, but just from a PR perspective, I do often look at these things and think, who's advising them? Who's giving them this advice? I will say, though, to defend them, which is that, they left their royal duties, 5 or 6 years ago. Look at the sleaze and scandal from the royal family since then. I mean, when they walked away, it was seen as they were the embarrassment. But I mean, 6 years on, we've had, cash in suitcases from Qatari politicians, £1 million from bin Laden's half-brothers. I mean, there's nothing illegal, but there's a lot of very odd things going on, and that is before we get to everything that happened with the former Prince Andrew. So,
yeah, but I will say the Prince Andrew thing happened well. I mean, this is regurgitating stuff that happened a long time ago. So I don't know whether that sort of translates alongside this. Do you see what I mean? Because really, we're kind of focusing on why he, maybe took so long to deal with, at least allowing his children to spend more time with, the wider family and all the mud that they've thrown. I get it, there's been scandals, but, does he need to add to them? Does he need to make it look worse? And what he did, even if you have those scandals, one thing about them is nobody really threw anybody under the bus. He's thrown his family right under it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, at the end of the day, he's got a family to protect, right? So his first job is to protect his family. And if he decides, or, they decide together that that is not an environment that they want to grow up in. And I think, it's easy for us to look at this because we don't live in that environment. But, when you look at what he went through, both him and his brother in the early years, with the death of his mother and all the scrutiny they got, I can see objectively that you might look at that and think, do you know what? I don't want my kids going through that. I don't want my family anywhere near that sort of stuff. And I do think, to be totally honest, I do think in the last few years they've been vindicated a little bit.
Really? In what way? What do you think that has happened that they've been vindicated for throwing the dirt on the royal family and also for allowing the Queen to go to her grave with an accusation of racism?
Well,
or
I mean,
what they call
all of that is it.
Or what they wanted to call it
unconscious bias,
point, sorry.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm just saying, all of that is exactly the point, right? Is that the sleaze and scandal that has come out of the royal family in the last few years. I mean, listen, the royal family is part of our country, and I'm very proud of every part of our country, but we have to acknowledge that the royal family is far from clean. There's an awful lot that needs to be sorted out in that royal family. And we've seen that recently, right? Is that they're trying to kind of do a bit of a PR cleanup by releasing their tax records and all that sort of stuff. But there is so much that I can see. If you're a father like Harry, or, as a couple between them, you might look at all of the stuff that has happened in the last few years and think, do you know what? We were right to walk away from that. Because do you want your kids being around all of that stuff with the former Prince Andrew? I mean, that alone, right? I mean, there's all the other stuff that I'm talking about.
Yeah, but that's Andrew, and that's gone many years previous, you know what I mean? It's all coming out now. But, what we're talking about, really, and we're talking about children here who don't know all that. They don't know any of that. They don't care about that. They just want love. They just want love from, they've got a wider family, which is what I believe the King, and I believe Camilla would have done the same, but, of course, he's the sort of blood grandfather. And we're not talking about that. What kids, keeping kids' minds fresh and allowing them to meet the wider family and understand, I think is very important. And he at least had that privilege when he was growing up and got to hang out with his grandfather. Look, Pablo, so sorry that we have to leave it there because I could talk to you about this for ages because I don't think we're going to agree, but it's fun. Pablo O'Hanna, thank you very much.
Squaddies, I need you to sit down for this one because something just happened on GB News. Yes, GB News, a channel that has built an entire business model on trashing Harry and Meghan. And a guest on their own panel just said the words, "They've been vindicated." Live, on air, about Prince Harry and Meghan. I had to watch it 3 times to believe it. This wasn't some Sussex-friendly outlet. This wasn't a soft interview on a streaming platform where the questions are pre-approved. This was a political strategist named Pablo O'Hanna sitting across from a GB News host, and instead of doing what every other guest on that channel does, nodding along, feeding the narrative, playing the game, He looked the host dead in the eye and basically said the royal family has given Harry every reason in the world to keep his distance. Let's get into exactly what was said, because the way this host tried to spin, deflect, and redirect the conversation once she realised where it was going. That's the real story here. So here's the context. Prince Harry was in the UK, and reports surfaced that he brought his children to Highgrove to see King Charles and Queen Camilla. Now, normally, this is the kind of story the UK tabloid machine loves to twist into a guilt narrative. Why did it take so long? The children barely know their grandfather. All the usual manufactured outrage designed to make Harry look like the villain for simply protecting his family. GB News brought on Pablo O'Hanna, presumably expecting him to play along with that framing. Instead, he opened by acknowledging that yes, from a pure PR strategy standpoint, you could ask why it took this long for a visit like this to happen. Fair enough, that's a reasonable starting point for a panel discussion. But then he did something GB News guests almost never do. He pivoted the conversation toward accountability. He pointed out that when Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties years ago, the institution painted them as the embarrassment, the disruptors, the ones who couldn't hack it. And yet, in the years since they left, look at what's actually come out of Buckingham Palace and the wider royal operation. Cash handed over in suitcases from Qatari politicians, a 7-figure sum linked to bin Laden's half-brother. And that's before you even get to the elephant in the room that the UK press desperately wants everyone to forget about, the former Prince Andrew. The host tried to shut that down immediately. Her response, essentially, was, "That's old news. We're not here to relitigate Andrew." Classic deflection. The second a guest brings up genuine institutional rot, the royal rota host wants to change the subject back to whatever makes Harry look like the problem. This is where it gets good, squaddies, because instead of backing down, Pablo doubled down. He said that when you step back and look at everything that's surfaced from inside the firm over the last several years, the scandals, the financial questions, the total absence of accountability for Andrew, you can objectively understand why Harry and Meghan looked at that environment and decided their children were better off away from it. And then he said it. The line that's been ringing around Sussex squad group chats for the last 24 hours. I do think in the last few years they've been vindicated a little bit. The host's reaction was priceless. You could hear the panic creep into her voice. "Really? In what way?" she snapped back, clearly not expecting to have to defend the institution live on her own network. She tried to pivot to the Queen, bringing up the racism accusation angle, trying to reframe Harry and Meghan as the ones who did lasting damage by speaking their truth before the late Queen passed. But Pablo didn't take the bait. He calmly restated his point. The sleaze and scandal coming out of the royal family in recent years is exactly the evidence that proves the Sussexes' instincts were correct. He even brought up the palace's own scramble to release tax records recently, a transparent PR clean-up operation if there ever was one, as proof that even the institution knows it has a credibility problem it's trying to paper over. Now the host wasn't done. She threw out the classic deranger's talking point, the one you'll hear regurgitated on every rota panel, every tabloid comment section, every unhinged corner of royal Twitter. Nobody in the royal family threw anybody under the bus, but Harry threw his family under the bus. I want you to think about how absurd that sentence is for a second. This is a family that has, by its own internal reporting and by outside investigation, dealt with financial scandals involving foreign cash, a convicted sex offender's associate walking the halls of a royal residence, and decades of an institution protecting its own image over protecting vulnerable people. But somehow, in the Derangers universe, the real crime is that Harry told the truth about his experience. Pablo actually handled this beautifully. He reframed it in terms every parent watching could understand. Harry's first job, like any father's, is to protect his family. If he and Meghan looked at that environment, an environment that failed to protect Harry and his brother during their most vulnerable years after losing their mother, and decided that wasn't a place they wanted their own children exposed to, that's not betrayal, that's parenting. He even connected it directly to Diana. He pointed out that anyone looking objectively at what William and Harry went through as children, the death of their mother under horrific circumstances, followed by relentless media scrutiny that never let up, could understand exactly why a father in Harry's position would build a wall between his own kids and that machine. And squaddies, you did not let this moment pass quietly. The replies under this clip were an absolute masterclass in receipts. One user pointed out that every single time the host invites someone from outside her usual echo chamber, she loses the argument, and that it happens so consistently at this point that it's almost comedic. Another comment nailed the double standard perfectly, pointing out how quick certain corners of the media are to bury what Andrew did while treating Meghan launching a jam brand like a national scandal. Let that sink in for a second. A convicted sex offender's associate gets soft-pedaled as old news, while Meghan, literally making jam, gets treated like a crime against the crown. Someone else brought up Princess Catherine, noting how rarely she appears at public events these days, and questioning how the same people demanding Harry explain himself never ask why the future Queen seems so isolated. It's a fair point. The scrutiny in this conversation is never applied evenly. It's always aimed at the Sussexes. And one more comment cut straight to the assumption baked into the host's entire argument. The idea that Charles had some open-standing invitation to see his California grandchildren whenever he wanted. Anyone who's actually followed this story knows that's not how it played out. There were stretches where visits were rare, brief, and difficult to arrange. You don't get to manufacture guilt over a relationship you never made an effort to nurture properly in the first place. Here's why I think this clip is bigger than just one awkward panel exchange. For years, the narrative machine around the royal family has operated on a simple formula. Put Harry and Meghan on trial, treat every royal scandal as ancient history, and never, ever let the two conversations touch each other in the same segment. What happened on GB News broke that formula, even if just for a few minutes. A guest, not a Sussex supporter, not someone with an agenda to defend Harry and Meghan, simply laid the facts next to each other. Qatari cash, Bin Laden money, Andrew, versus two parents who looked at an institution that failed to protect them as children and decided not to repeat that mistake with their own kids. When you put it that way, out loud, in a professional TV studio in front of a host whose entire job is to keep the narrative in a certain direction, the vindication argument writes itself. That's exactly why the host tried so hard to steer the conversation back toward the Queen, back toward old grievances, back toward anything except the actual pattern of behavior from the institution itself. The mud has always been thrown one direction in this story, But moments like this, however small, however quickly buried by the next day's headlines, are proof that the truth doesn't need Sussex-friendly outlets to surface. Sometimes it slips out on the very channels built to bury it. So, squaddies, that's the breakdown. A GB News panel, of all places, giving us a genuine, unscripted admission that the Sussexes' instincts about that family and that institution were correct all along. Not from us. Not from Sussex Twitter. From inside the belly of the beast itself. If this kind of breakdown is exactly what you come to this channel for, cutting through the tabloid spin and laying out the receipts so you don't have to dig for them yourself, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what you thought of Pablo's takedown. Was there a moment in this exchange that stood out to you the most? Let me know below. Until next time, squaddies, keep the receipts close, and I'll see you in the next one.